Okay. Thank you, Sonia. Can you hear me? Can you see the slides well?
Yes, everything is working perfectly.
Okay, great. So thank you for the kind presentation. And I also want to thank Sonia Betts and the Library Publishing Coalition's Program Committee for the invitation to present the Helsinki Initiative on Multilingualism in Scholarly Communication. The initiative was launched in 2019 to foster an environment that values multilingual scholarly communication, science communication, and open access to scholarly publications in all languages. And this is actually the first time that I present the Helsinki Initiative to an audience from an English-speaking country. So it is very interesting for me to learn also how the concerns of the Helsinki Initiative seem from your perspective. So, yes. So the long-term goal of Helsinki Initiative is to ensure the continued availability of high-quality research published in all languages needed across the world for effective communication of research knowledge within and beyond academia. Helsinki Initiative is a joint effort of Cost Action NRES, meaning European Network for Research Evaluation in the Social Sciences and Humanities, Universities Norway, meaning the Rectors Conference, and 3 organizations from Finland, namely Federation of Finnish Learned Societies, where I work, Committee for Public Information in Finland that takes care of science communication issues, and the Finnish Association for Scholarly Publishing. Almost 5,000 signatories from over 70 countries agree that multilingualism in scholarly communication is an international, not just a national or local concern. In this presentation, I will first introduce different approaches to multilingualism and go through some of its challenges and give an overview of the recommendations of the Helsinki Initiative. Then I will explore how multilingual scientific knowledge benefits science and society, why we need to protect the national language journals and book publishers, making multilingual publishing possible, and why it is important to recognize and reward high-quality research published in and communicated in all languages. In the end of the talk, I will summarize some key takeaways. During this presentation, I will often draw on data and experiences from Finland, which provides an example of challenges of maintaining and promoting multilingualism, as well as advancing open access in a small language area of 5.8 million native Finnish speakers. This is, of course, very different compared to, for example, French language, let alone English, with hundreds of millions of speakers globally. According to the Constitution of Finland, national languages of Finland are Finnish and Swedish. Finnish is the language of 78% of 5.5 million population in Finland, while Swedish, the main administrative language until the late 19th century, is the first language of 5% of the population. Other official languages in Finland include Sami, Karelian, Finnish Kalo, as well as sign languages. But they are not very often used as academic languages. Before I begin, I also briefly would like to tell you about the organization where I work, the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies, in short TSV, from the Finnish name Tieteellisten seurojen valtuuskunta. Federation was founded in 1899 as a cooperation organization for Finnish learned societies. And we currently have almost 300 learned societies from all fields of arts and sciences. And our legal duties include supporting member societies, developing scholarly publishing and dissemination, organizing international exchange of scientific literature, and increasing awareness and use of research knowledge in society. And our federation also hosts several expert bodies, including the Committee for Public Information I already mentioned, also Finnish National Board on Research Integrity, Publication Forum, which is the national expert-based quality classification of peer-reviewed journals and book publishers. This is where I work, as Sonja mentioned. We also host open science coordination in Finland, and most recently, we also coordinate the national recommendation on responsible assessment of a researcher in Finland. The Federation uses state subsidies received from the Ministry of Education and Culture to support its member societies' core activities, including organizing conferences and publishing scholarly journals and books. And we also support technical publishing infrastructures, including 2 open access publishing platforms. Journal.fi for journals launched in 2017. It already hosts more than 100 open access journals published in Finland. And more recently, we also launched edition.fi for open access books. These platforms are based on Open Journal System and Open Monograph System, and they are free for the learned societies to use. And we also offer a very low cost service for other type of publishers in Finland as well. So let's turn to multilingualism. Multilingualism is connected to situations that exist, of course, everywhere around the world where multiple languages exist and are used side by side in a society. Multilingualism refers to the use of many languages, both by individuals and communities, including also communities of researchers globally, regionally, and locally. In the case of scholarly communication, it may be useful to consider multilingualism at level, for example, of publications or documents available in different languages, at the level of researchers, in how many languages they use in publication and dissemination of their results. We can also talk about multilingualism of publishers, meaning the variety of language options they have in their journals and books for publishing research in different languages. We can also talk of multilingualism at the level of scientific fields. What are the needs and patterns of language diversity in scholarly communication? And we can also look at the level of organizations and countries. What is the language diversity of the entire publication output of such a large unit? There are also several often overlapping or perhaps even intersecting challenges that may hinder researchers from multilingual scholarly communication practices. First, authors and audiences, of course, have their different language skills and preferences. Also, publisher availability for different language publications is important, as is availability and quality of machine and human translation services. At national level, language politics may mandate or discourage use of certain languages. Research policies, for example, promoting internationalization, may lead researchers to prioritize certain languages over others. And also, rewards and incentives are important. Do researchers believe that they can have funding and progress in career if they publish and disseminate results in different languages? On this page, you can see the main recommendations of the Helsinki initiative, and they are addressed to policymakers, leaders, universities, research institutions, research funders, libraries, and researchers all over the world to promote multilingualism in scholarly communication and more broadly multilingualism in science. The first recommendation concerns supporting dissemination of research results in multiple languages for the full benefit of the society. The second main recommendation concerns protecting national infrastructures for publishing locally relevant research, meaning the journals and book publishers that actually make publishing in different languages possible. And third recommendation concerns promoting language diversity in research assessment, evaluation, and funding systems. So let's first take a look at why we need to support dissemination of research results for the full benefit of the society. What has multilingualism to do with that? First, multilingualism and language diversity are a matter of rights. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 27, states that everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. And this, according to Article 2, without distinction of any kind, such as language. For example, the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union also places an obligation on the Union to respect linguistic diversity and prohibits discrimination on grounds of language. And of course, language rights are often recognized in different ways in national legislations. International excellence, collaboration, and mobility, including communication of research results to international audiences, are very important science policy goals. It is important to communicate research results to international expert audiences according to the best practices and traditions of each discipline. However, the policies for open science as well as responsible research and innovation call for increased access to research, interaction between science and society, and public understanding of science. Also, citizen science is an important new approach. To take care of all these needs, both for internationalization and local relevance and impact, we need multilingual scholarly communication. According to the UNESCO recommendation approved in 2021, one of the main goals of open science is to make multilingual scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable for everyone. UNESCO recommends that the member states consider encouraging multilingualism in the practice of science, in scientific publications, and in academic communications. This is also a matter of improving equity, diversity, and inclusion in academia. To give an example, multilingualism is an important challenge for Europe. According to a statement by the European University Association supporting the Helsinki initiative, multilingualism is particularly relevant for Europe as its research is characterized by geographic, cultural, and linguistic diversity. The Union has 24 official and working languages, and according to the Europeans and Their Languages report published in 2012, almost half of the Europeans were not able to speak any foreign language well enough to hold a conversation, and only 38% were able to do so in English. the most widely spoken foreign language. But multilingualism is, of course, highly important for other continents as well. For example, Latin America, with Spanish and Portuguese as the two dominant colonial languages, mix of official and unofficial indigenous languages, as well as the demands of using English as a global lingua franca of science. The international scientific community defines the scientific and ethical standards for research methods, data, and reporting of results. And this lays the foundation for obtaining reliable research-based knowledge. At its broadest, the impact of research can be global, but this impact is always realized locally in particular societies where different languages are actually written and spoken. The COVID-19 pandemic, which began in spring 2020, has very clearly demonstrated the importance of multilingual and multidisciplinary scholarly communication. The global scientific community rapidly produced an enormous amount of COVID-19 research, most of which was published in English in international scientific journals and also in different kinds of platforms. But the application of scientific knowledge always requires critical discussion and dialogue between the scientific community, familiar with the local conditions, and different actors within society. Researchers and experts have played an important role in disseminating and discussing the latest research-based knowledge in national and local languages for the use of decision makers, authorities, professionals, and citizens. So to cope with grand challenges and to meet sustainable development goals, we need both globalized and localized research communicated in various languages and formats. Both multilingualism and open access should facilitate the dissemination of research knowledge beyond academia to support, for example, teaching, learning, enlightenment, critical debate, professional practice, innovation, and also decision making. Yet evidence of societal impact of national journals and open access remains relatively weak. Recently, we set out to study the diversity of users of open access articles on the Finnish journal.fi platform, which hosts, as I mentioned today, over 100 open access journals from Finland, publishing in different fields and mainly in Finnish and English languages. The study was based on an online survey conducted on 48 journals during spring 2020, in which visitors were asked to indicate their background and allow their location and download behavior be tracked by tracking cookies. So what we learned is that users were predominantly students. Students were the largest group, and second largest group were researchers. But the users included also private citizens, experts, teachers, journalists, civil servants, entrepreneurs, even politicians. And especially students and non-academic users were prioritizing articles available in Finnish and Swedish languages. Another important finding was that the vast majority, 98% of all visits to national language articles originated from Finland, whereas 63% of the visits to articles in foreign languages, mainly in English, came from foreign locations. So the national language publications are vital, especially for the Finnish research community and society. and for the local relevance and outreach of research. And this is, of course, in quite stark contrast with, for instance, Erudite platform, which is operated in Canada for French language articles. And they have very, very wide international readership beyond Canada and France. We are perhaps accustomed to think that national languages are relevant mainly for the social sciences and humanities scholars. But comprehensive national publication data from Finland shows that the majority of publications that are not peer-reviewed, that are targeted to professional and general audiences, is in the national languages, both in STEM fields and the SSH fields. In STEM, national language publishing seems to serve mainly science communication, whereas the original peer-reviewed research published by Finnish researchers is almost only published in English. Especially in the SSH, research is often strongly contextualized, creating a specific need for original peer-reviewed research in the main languages of researchers and citizens who are affected by this research. It is, I believe, almost impossible to imagine that all research on society, history, and culture in Finland or United States would be published only in foreign languages, mainly by foreign researchers and foreign publishers. And this brings me to the second recommendation of the Helsinki initiative. So let's consider why we need to protect and support national infrastructures for publishing locally relevant research. Countries have very different journal and book publishing landscapes when it comes to publication languages. The country profiles naturally reflect to a large extent the population of speakers of different languages in the country, often prioritizing the main languages of researchers and citizens, but also the political, administrative, cultural, and academic status of languages and their role in scholarly communication. Already a quick analysis of journals indexed in DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals, shows some main differences. I selected in this analysis 10 countries with most journals indexed in DOAJ, as well as I added Finland to the bottom of the list. So we can already see that UK, US, and Switzerland publish mainly English-only journals indexed in DOAJ. In Brazil, Spain, and Russia, most journals are multilingual, including English as one of the possible languages, or journals publishing only in the other, typically some of the national languages. And Finland is an example of a country with a mix of all these three types of journals. We all know that a large share of international English language publishing is dominated by few commercial oligopoly publishers, as Vincent Larivière has established. But the landscape for local language journals and books is much more fragmented and relies to a large extent on small-scale, non-profit, scholar-led publishers, which then rely a lot on voluntary work of the researchers themselves. Of course, the commercial publishers do also, but this is a bit different story. For example, national language humanities journals in Finland are mainly published by learned societies. Many of them, or actually almost all of them, are our member societies. In Spain, most of the national language humanities journals are published by universities. And I believe this situation is the same in Latin America to a very, very large degree. In Norway, however, also commercial publishers play an important role. However, as far as I know, in Norway, even the commercial publishers are not too profit hungry. One of the most important objectives of the Helsinki initiative is to secure sufficient resources for not-profit scholarly publishers, so they can maintain a high level of science and research integrity in scholarly publishing in the national languages. And of course, to secure a transition to open access publishing in a sustainable manner. Quality and integrity should be just as important principles for English language publishing, international publishing, as it is in the other languages and locally relevant research. In order to provide viable outlets for the Finnish and foreign researchers in future, also the journals and book publishers operating in Finland are required to fulfill the expectations for immediate and free open access to publicly funded research, as increasingly mandated by the international open access policies, such as the Research Funders Coalition S, that is doing a very effective work in shaping the landscape toward a more open publishing culture. The Finnish research community has also agreed to set as a goal the immediate open access to peer-reviewed journal and conference articles as of 2022, so this year. It seems from the picture that we are not quite getting there, but we are trying. And there is a national policy for open access to scholarly books under preparation currently. But the demand for open access poses a new sustainability challenge for Finnish scientific journals and book publishers. How to continue even the small-scale publishing operations sustainably without subscription fees or sales. In non-Anglophone countries, policymakers, evaluators, and also researchers may question the value of publishing in languages other than English. That is partly due to the science policies promoting internationalization and so forth. Consequently, national publishers need increasingly to argue for their importance to research and society in order to motivate high-quality submissions, of course, from the authors, but also to legitimize funding, partly public funding for their publishing operations and transition to open access. This also requires additional resources. There currently are around 350 peer-reviewed journals and series published in Finland, of which around 60 Directory of Open Access indexed journals are just a small subset. With this slide, I wanted to give you an impression of the importance of the national publishers in Finland. So I think it underscores the significance of the national scholarly publishers that from 2018 to 2020, over 11% of the peer-reviewed publication output of Finnish research organizations were published in Finland. This includes almost 10,000 peer-reviewed publications, including journal, conference, and book articles, monographs, and edited works over a 3-year period. Domestic journals and publishers are used in all scientific fields, but of course, as you can see, especially in the humanities and social sciences. Domestic journals and book publishers are also used by all types of research organizations. So researchers in universities, hospital districts, state research institutions, and universities of applied sciences. use national outlets. Among the journal and conference articles, which are more typical in natural sciences, including here engineering, medical sciences, and agriculture as well, the proportion of domestic publications is somewhat smaller, 8%. It is important to recognize that Finnish scholarly journals and book publishers have the unique and important task of providing the Finnish research community with options to publish new research and have critical discussions about locally and internationally significant research results in the national languages. Indeed, 72% of domestic journals and conference articles and 83% of book publications are published in Finnish or Swedish languages. So from the perspective of multilingual scholarly communication, foreign scholarly publishers cannot replace domestic scholarly publishers as they publish virtually no Finnish language publications. Research is published in the national languages in all scientific fields, but this is, of course, particularly important in the humanities and social sciences, as the research is often focused on Finnish society, history, culture, and language. It's also important to remember, however, that a considerable proportion of the publishing activity of domestic publishers is aimed at international scientific community. 28% of the peer-reviewed journal and conference article output and 17% of book publications are published in foreign languages, primarily in English, of course, with the idea of targeting them also to international audiences. Thus, the Finnish scholarly publishers indeed serve both the national and the international scientific community. (53% of domestic and 57% of foreign peer-reviewed publications by Finnish researchers are openly accessible, either in gold, bronze, green, or hybrid mode. And this shows that the difference in the share of open access outputs is not that large between the national publishers and the foreign publishers used by Finnish researchers. Book publications have clearly a lower degree of open access than journal and conference articles. But actually, Finnish scholarly book publishers are doing better in respect of open access share than the foreign book publishers who publish research by Finnish researchers. The major concern, however, is that the share of open access in Finnish language publications is much lower than in the other publication languages. And this holds true both for journal and conference articles as well as book publications. The proportion of openly available publications appears to be increasing at a slower rate in case of domestic publications and publications published in the national languages than in the case of foreign publications. One conclusion is that the promotion of open access is the greatest challenge in the case of Finnish and Swedish language publishing, which is particularly important to multilingualism and locally relevant research concerning Finnish society, history, and culture. And of course, that kind of research also has broad audiences outside the academic community alone. The lower open access uptake may be due partly to the fact that it has been practical for Finnish researchers, research organizations, libraries, and funders in recent years to pay for open access costs in international publishing channels by means of read and publish package deals and article processing charges, the APC, whereas no consensus has so far been reached regarding a communal funding model for open access in domestic publishing. That would mean some kind of a funding model for diamond open access. International open access funding consortia exist and typically support international journals, but as far as I know, they do not offer support for national journals, especially those published in the local languages alone. And this leads me to think that the public understanding of science across the world, which multilingualism obviously promotes, should perhaps be a concern for the international academic community and not just a concern for those in the specific country. One possible reaction to the demand, one possible reaction to the difficult situation of some of the Finnish more traditional outlets is to demand the replacement of the traditional venues with new open access journals and platforms, or that multilingual access to research will be solved by means of machine translation. Well, machine translation is not a substitute for publishing research results in multiple languages to different audiences. This is partly because machine translation works better between large languages than the smaller ones. Publishing original research in different languages also serves the important function of developing scientific terminology in the national languages, which is of course needed also for the machine translation to work. Also, the new open access megajournals and platforms seem to be relevant alternatives for subscription-based international journals, which have large pools of potential editors, reviewers, authors, and readers. In practice, we can see, looking at Finland, that megajournals and platforms have not replaced specialized journals, as only 3% of the entire Finnish university's peer-reviewed output is published in open access megajournals and platforms. The use of large platforms is particularly low in the social sciences and humanities, in which the national language journals and book publishers are most relevant. Problem is partly that policymakers and funders in Finland and possibly elsewhere may believe or hope that open access platforms are already the new norm in scholarly communication, and so they may be unwilling to invest in the open access transition of the traditional outlets. But there indeed is no evidence of platforms overtaking specialized journals in scholarly communication, at least in Finland, and I think if we were able to do similar analysis in other countries, we would find exactly the same result. So the number of journals, different journals used by Finnish universities researchers to publish their research has not changed during the past decade. It was around 6,500 in 2011, and still in 2020, 6,800 journals were used to publish peer-reviewed research in Finland. So I would like to arrive at conclusion that it's very difficult to replace established national or local language journals that strongly support and rely on small but very committed local research communities. So any action plan to promote and implement multilingualism needs to address how can we secure a sustainable open access transition of well-established national journals publishing locally relevant research and developing scientific terminology in the local languages. The current landscape of scholarly publishing in Finland has developed since the early 19th century. So of course the journals and book publishers differ considerably in their starting point, their readiness, their resources, and their know-how to make the open access transition. It is possible to facilitate the open access transition with platforms like journal.fi. But this is simply providing a technical solution is not enough. The new or well-established journals that use the platform need also resources to maintain and develop publishing operations, meaning all the editorial peer review work, etc. Everything that goes to running a good journal based on good editing and peer review. Well, two publishing models for immediate open access publishing, so-called cold open access, have been established alongside subscription fee-based publishing during the past decades. And one of these is based completely on APCs, the article processing charges, while the other model is free for publication authors and readers alike, the so-called diamond open access model. Open access publishing model based on APCs, and this I think we can clearly see has proven to be practical solution mainly for journals that are published in English and aimed at international authors and readers. And preferably also STEM fields where there is more funding to afford the APC payments. The analysis of DOHA register shows that for open access journals publishing articles in almost all other languages than English or Persian or Indonesian, the Diamond Open Access model has proven to be virtually the only viable open access publishing model. There are not many scientific journals operating on APCs in Finland, and the very few that do so are English language journals aimed specifically at international scientific community, and they are indeed operating in STEM fields. The majority of Finnish peer-reviewed open access journals, those journals that are already open access, are Diamond open access journals. And I think here we are in the same boat with Latin America. I don't think Finland can see any other option for cold open access than the Diamond open access. Yes. There is perhaps another point of concern to raise, that the APC-based funding model is also fastly increasing the dominance of the English language in the cold open access publishing environment. And we can see this quite clearly combining the DOHA register with data created by Walt Crawford. And what we can see is that the article output of English-only APC-based journals in DOHA has more than doubled since 2015. And this is in a very strong contrast to English-only Diamond Open Access journals, which show very, very modest increase and growth in output. And also the same, both APC-based and Diamond Open Access journals publishing in multiple languages, including English, as well as journals publishing exclusively in languages other than English. Also in these journals, we see very modest growth. So it seems that installing payments, the APC, on the same side as the pressure to publish makes many traditional and also even some of the new commercial open access publishers to compete for quantity of publications rather than quality of editorial procedures and contents. According to a comprehensive study conducted in 2020, there were 330 6 peer-reviewed journals and publication series in Finland. 177 of these were identified as open access channels, meaning that they provide immediate open access to all contents. And at that time, only 50 were included in directory of open access journals. Today, the number is somewhat larger, a little bit over 60 journals in the OHA. So this means that only a relatively small share of the Finnish peer-reviewed journals and series have been able to fulfill the best international standards set for open access publishing, especially the technical and policy standards set by the Directory of Open Access Journals, or the requirements for Plan S compliant open access. Most journals and series do not, for instance, provide persistent identifiers such as ORCID or DOI that are very important for interoperability and visibility and reuse of publication information in the international and national infrastructures, resources, and services. The open access transition of the entire national publishing sector, which we are hoping to see, entails a this is difficult to pronounce, digitalization, providing open access preferably through golden or green route, adoption of best publishing standards regarding quality, ethics, also technical standards related to FAIR, and also improving visibility and findability of the publications and metadata. Finally, let's take a look at the third recommendation of the Helsinki initiative concerning promotion of language diversity in research assessment, evaluation, and funding systems. Starting with the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, the DORA Declaration, the Leiden Manifesto on Research Metrics, and the Metric Tide Report, and many, many other policies. An increasing number of international statements outline guiding principles for responsible research assessment. Instead of a narrow focus on research, on publications, and on research metrics, the global call for responsible assessment entails rewarding broad range of open science practices, recognizing diverse outputs, activities, and impacts of academic work, as well as respecting the differences between fields. Taking stock of the international discussion on responsible research assessment, the Helsinki initiative emphasizes that language biases are produced in both evaluations based on research metrics, as well as evaluations based on expert assessment. Perhaps the clearest example of everyday language bias in expert assessment comes from the manuscript peer review in journals, where it is a frequently reported experience of non-native English speakers that reviewers judge their research based on the quality of their writing instead of the content. This is actually very important learning because the global research assessment reform calls for more qualitative expert assessments based on narrative CVs and other qualitative assessments instead of metrics. So it's very important to take this type of language biases into consideration. In all kinds of expert evaluation procedures, also the selection of assessment language can discriminate against researchers who are not native speakers or fully fluent in the given or required languages. The problems with research metrics are, of course, more widely recognized. But I will not talk about journal impact factor. Journal impact factor covers mainly STEM journals, and it is a problem, of course, and very serious problem when misused in assessment, whether in STEM or SSH. But SSH has its own problems already with the database coverage. And one important challenge in assessment is that, especially in non-English speaking countries, international excellence is too often equated with English language publications, especially those published in journals having an impact factor or those indexed in Web of Science and Scopus databases. There is a lot of empirical evidence to show that multilingualism in scholarly communication is a very, very vibrant and ongoing practice. In a recent study we conducted in collaboration with NRES Network, we were able to show that in years 2013, 14, and 15, more than half of 25,000 social sciences and humanities researchers in 7 European countries actually published peer-reviewed journal articles in more than one language. We also saw very interesting differences between countries. For instance, Nordic countries and Flanders have a much larger share of English language publications compared to Poland and some other Eastern or mid-European countries. But what we also discovered is alarming indeed, that almost 94,000 peer-reviewed journal articles the SSH researchers published in the local languages of their own countries over the 3-year period were, of course, invisible in Web of Science and Scopus databases. So this is indeed an important problem from the SSH perspective. Yet many policymakers, evaluators, and funders think that research of any value to science and society is published in international English language journals. As my dear colleague Emanuel Kulczyski from the Helsinki Initiative group often emphasizes, good quality research can be published in all languages, and this should be recognized. So indeed, researchers should be recognized and rewarded according to the results and the impact of their research, despite the language of application or publication. And this requires taking into account publications outside the Web of Science and Scopus databases, and also engaging sufficiently diverse pool of experts and linguistic skills in the assessment panels doing expert evaluation. I have no idea whether I am passing over the time limit or approaching it comfortably. But before closing this talk, I would like to highlight a recently published handbook on research assessment in the social sciences, edited by Tim Engels and Emanuel Kulczyski. And don't worry, most of the chapters are already openly available as preprints. There are 2 chapters specifically in this handbook that are relevant regarding open access and multilingualism. And they both chapters, as do all chapters in the quite rich book, provide also practical implications for research assessment. From this chapter that you can see on the slide, I just highlight the first recommendation, that quality of research, if we really follow to the letter the idea of DORA, should be assessed based on the contents of research rather than the journal or the publisher. But I must say also open availability of publications, because high quality research can be published in open access or non-open access way. The second chapter on multilingualism underlines in the same vein that research quality should be assessed based on the content, not the language of publications. Language and language biases in metrics and expert assessment should be taken into consideration already when planning evaluation, assessment, or funding procedures. It is also possible, when we think of metrics, to develop and rely on comprehensive publication data that indeed cover both peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed outputs, regardless of language. You may have noted that I have shown during this presentation many analyses based on data from a national publication information data hub in Finland, which integrates comprehensive publication metadata from the Finnish universities' local current research information systems, the CRIS systems. In Finnish universities, especially libraries, are very much involved, and their expertise is invaluable in collection and curation of the publication data. So, some final remarks on assessment. Language biases in assessment can compromise equal opportunities for individual researchers as well as institutions with different missions. These may lead to systemic undervaluation of SSH research compared to STEM fields in funding, and in danger if multilingual practices are disincentivized locally relevant research and knowledge transfer beyond academia. So researchers should be able to trust that high quality research is valued regardless of publishing languages, and that they can make a career and have funding, even if they spend time on writing to policymakers, professionals, or general public, or act as editors or reviewers for local language journals, or engage in translations, which can be extremely substantive scholarly work. So from the perspective of the Helsinki initiative, multilingualism should of course be part of the global responsible research assessment reform. In Finland, we specifically hope that Europe would follow the lead of the Latin American Council of Social Sciences that has taken a very taken multilingualism very strongly into consideration in their reform of research assessment. So after a long talk, I shall summarize some key takeaways very shortly. So to ensure the availability and vitality of multilingual scientific knowledge in all researchers' and citizens' main languages, following actions are needed from the international and national stakeholders. In science policy, recognize the value of multilingualism and balance international excellence with local relevance of research. In the public funding of open access, prioritize scholar-led, non-profit, diamond open access publishers of journals and books, especially in the local languages. There will be enough money to take care of the international English language publishers as well. In research assessment reform, recognize and reward research published in all languages and address language biases in metrics and expert assessment. Thank you very much for your attention. Here you have some more information on the initiative. You can go and read and perhaps even sign the initiative. But at this point, maybe there are questions or comments.